My husband is very sick right now with a serious illness that makes it hard for him to do normal, everyday things. Simple tasks that most people don't think twice about, like going to the store, helping out at home, or playing with our daughter, are things he just can't do anymore because his body is too weak. Because of this, I've had to take on everything myself. I'm the only one working and earning money to support our family, and I'm also handling everything at home. It's a lot to carry, but I'm doing my best to keep things going for all of us. Back when I first met my husband, he was healthy, full of energy, and living a normal, independent life. There were no signs whatsoever that his health would ever take such a devastating turn. He was strong, reliable, and our connection was filled with joy, laughter, and love. It didn't take long for me to realize that he was someone I wanted to build a future with, and marrying him felt like the most natural and happiest decision I could make. About a year after we got married, we got the great news that I was going to have a baby. Our daughter was born healthy and happy. Becoming parents for the first time was exciting and also a little hard, as any new parent knows. We spent all our time taking care of our baby, learning as we went and helping each other through the sleepless nights and new daily habits. Life felt busy and tough, but very rewarding. And back then, we didn't know how much our lives would change in the years ahead. Then, completely out of the blue, everything changed. Our daughter was just 4 years old at the time, still so little, still needing so much from both of us. One morning, my husband woke up and told me something was wrong. He said his legs felt unusually heavy, like he was trying to move through wet cement. At first, he thought maybe he had just slept in an awkward position or that it was something temporary. But as the minutes passed, it became terrifyingly clear that he couldn't move them at all. He looked at me with confusion and fear in his eyes and said, "I can't move my legs." My heart sank. I rushed to his side, hoping it was just a momentary numbness. It wasn't. The realization hit us like a wave. My husband seemed to be suddenly, inexplicably paralyzed. Panic set in, but I had to stay calm. I immediately called for an ambulance, my mind racing with worst case scenarios. What could cause something like this to happen overnight? At the hospital, my husband had to go through a lot of emergency care, scans, blood tests, MRIs, and consultations with specialists. Hours turned into days. The fear and uncertainty were unbearable. Eventually, after what felt like an endless battery of medical evaluations, the doctors gave us the diagnosis. My husband had a rare progressive illness, something we had never even heard of before, something that had been silently developing with no outward symptoms until that morning. The news shattered us. What then followed were countless sleepless, tear-filled nights spent grappling with fear, grief, and the overwhelming weight of this new reality. Throughout everything we've gone through, every hospital visit, every difficult night, every uncertain moment, my mother-in-law has been a constant pillar of support. Her presence in our lives during this unimaginable chapter has been nothing short of essential. While I was busy accompanying my husband to endless medical appointments, test after test, and his exhausting physical therapy sessions, she was the one who stepped in to care for our daughter. She made sure our little girl felt safe, loved, and looked after in our absence, giving me the peace of mind I so desperately needed in order to fully focus on my husband's health and recovery. I truly have no complaints when it comes to my mother-in-law. Her dedication to our family has been selfless and steady, and I'm deeply grateful for everything she has done to help us stay afloat. My only issue is with her second husband. You see, my mother-in-law was previously married to my husband's biological father, but that relationship ended in divorce. Later, when my husband was already in college and mostly out of the house, she remarried. Unlike my mother-in-law, who is warm, compassionate, and empathetic, her second husband is abrasive, distant, and frankly difficult to be around. My husband has confided in me many times about how uneasy he has always felt in his stepfather's presence. Even before his illness, there was never any sense of closeness or bond formed between the two of them. A stepfather-in-law doesn't have his own biological children of his own, so he often makes a point of reminding my husband whenever he can that he considers him his son. While this may come from a place of longing or a desire to belong, it consistently makes my husband deeply uncomfortable. The reality is, my husband's biological father is still very much present in his life. Even though his parents divorced many years ago, both his mother and father remained actively involved in raising him and supporting him well into adulthood. He never experienced any sort of abandonment or absence that might create a space for someone else to step in as a father figure. So from his perspective, his identity and family structure were already firmly established by the time his mother remarried. He doesn't see how someone who entered his life when he was already an adult, someone who never raised him, taught him values, or supported his growth in any meaningful way, can claim a paternal role and act like his dad. My husband has tried to express this gently but clearly. On more than one occasion, he has respectfully reminded his stepfather that while he appreciates him as his mother's husband and is willing to offer him the respect that role deserves, he does not view him as a father. He's trying to draw a healthy boundary, affirming that their relationship can still be cordial and respectful without overstepping into something it's not. Unfortunately, his stepfather either doesn't understand or chooses not to accept this boundary. He continues to push the idea of being a father figure to my husband, even now when my husband is at his most vulnerable and needs genuine support more than ever. Ever since my husband's illness took hold, we've been fortunate to receive support from both sides of the family. While my mother-in-law has been incredibly hands-on with caring for our daughter, stepping in regularly to babysit so I can focus on my husband's needs, both my stepfather-in-law and my husband's biological father have offered financial assistance to help cover my husband's mounting medical bills. The costs have been overwhelming at times, and their help has made a real difference. My husband and I are truly grateful for their contributions, and we've made sure to express that appreciation sincerely and often. In times like these, every bit of help matters, and it's not lost on us how fortunate we are to have people willing to step in. That said, I would be lying if I said everything has felt comfortable, especially when it comes to my stepfather-in-law. Despite his financial support, his behavior towards me and my daughter has started to shift in ways that are unsettling. There's a subtle change in the way he carries himself around us now, almost as if the help he's provided has given him a sense of entitlement or authority that he didn't previously feel he had. It's not always overt, but it's there. In his tone, in his comments, in the way he interacts with my daughter, as though he holds some kind of elevated position in our lives simply because he's helped financially. It all began one day when my stepfather-in-law offered to give me and my daughter a ride home from the hospital. We had just spent time visiting my husband, and because it had started raining and I didn't have my car with me, I accepted his offer without hesitation. At the time, I thought it was a simple act of kindness, something any family member might do under the circumstances. I was emotionally exhausted, drained from the stress of the day, and grateful not to have to worry about transportation in that moment. During the drive, he struck up a conversation expressing sympathy for what my husband and I were going through. I let my guard down slightly, overwhelmed by everything, and began venting a little, just trying to get some of the pressure off my chest. But then, out of nowhere, the tone of the conversation shifted. In what felt like an almost rehearsed moment, he looked over at me and said something that completely blindsided me. "If anything ever happens to your husband, I would love to take care of you and your daughter." I froze, unsure of how to respond. Before I could even process that statement, he went on saying that I was still young and that with my beauty, I'd have plenty of prospects. If life took an unfortunate turn, it was an incredibly inappropriate and unsettling thing to say, especially given the context: my husband fighting for his life, my daughter sitting quietly in the back seat, and me just trying to survive each day without falling apart. From that point on, I felt deeply uncomfortable. I didn't say much for the rest of the ride. I just stayed quiet, nodding politely, trying to mask the discomfort I felt inside me until we finally got home. The next incident occurred not long after, and it left me feeling shaken to my core. I had gone over to my mother-in-law's home to pick up my daughter after another long, emotionally exhausting day at the hospital with my husband. That particular day had been especially hard. My husband, overwhelmed by pain from his ongoing surgeries and the side effects of his medications, had been unusually agitated. He lashed out verbally, not because he meant to hurt me, but because he was suffering, and unfortunately, I was the closest person to absorb that pain. I knew not to take it personally, but that didn't make it any easier to bear. By the time I arrived at my mother-in-law's, I was holding back tears. The moment I saw her and my daughter, the emotional dam broke. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She comforted me with warmth and understanding, holding me while I let it all out. At that moment, I felt safe, like I was finally allowed to fall apart without having to explain or justify myself. After a while, she gently stepped away to get me a glass of water from the kitchen. And that's when everything changed. My stepfather-in-law, who had been nearby but quiet until then, suddenly sat beside me. Before I could even process what was happening, he placed his hand on my thigh. I was stunned, completely frozen. Then he began slowly moving his hand up and down my thigh, speaking in a low voice, telling me he was there to take care of me. It took me a moment to register what was happening. I felt disgusted, violated, and completely blindsided. I immediately pushed his hand away and stood up, my body trembling. I told him firmly not to touch me again. Seeing the shock and revulsion on my face, he quickly began apologizing, saying he didn't mean anything by it, and that seeing me cry had somehow broken his heart, as though that could explain or excuse such an inappropriate and boundary-crossing gesture. I made it crystal clear in that moment that what he did was not okay. I told him directly to never put his hands on me again. He nodded and agreed, still insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but no amount of apologies could undo the sense of violation I felt. I left their house quickly. Later on, after some time had passed and I'd had a chance to process the incident, I decided to bring it up with my mother-in-law during a private phone call. I felt it was important for her to know, not just for my own peace of mind, but also because I needed to set clear boundaries in a home where I often had to leave my daughter. I waited until we were speaking one-on-one, hoping that she would take the situation seriously and understand the discomfort and unease I had been carrying with me ever since. I carefully explained what had happened, how vulnerable I had been that day, how her husband had touched me inappropriately and made disturbing comments under the guise of concern. I wasn't angry during the conversation, I just needed to be heard and supported. But instead of understanding or outrage I had hoped for, she downplayed the incident. She told me that she didn't think it was as big of a deal as I was making it out to be. She reassured me that her husband was only trying to be kind and that perhaps his words or actions had just come out wrong. According to her, his intentions were good. That response hit me hard. I felt invalidated, as though my experience had been minimized and swept aside to preserve comfort and avoid confrontation. Her reaction left me feeling isolated, uncertain about how safe or welcome I truly was in her home from that point forward. It also made me question whether I could continue to leave my daughter there, knowing that someone who had violated my boundaries would still be present. Recently, I was at home spending some quiet quality time with my daughter. We were playing, laughing, just trying to enjoy a moment of peace amidst the chaos that has consumed our lives for so long. It was one of those rare, gentle moments that gave me a sense of normalcy again. Then, completely unannounced, my stepfather-in-law showed up at our door. He said he had come by to drop off some home-cooked meals that my mother-in-law had prepared for us. A kind gesture she often does, and one I've always appreciated. He handed me the food and greeted my daughter with a hug. I didn't think too much of it at first. I thanked him and went into the kitchen to put the food away. But then, from the kitchen, I overheard something that made me stop in my tracks. He was talking to my daughter, my young, impressionable daughter, and repeatedly encouraging her to call him Daddy. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Confused, I stepped out and asked him directly what was going on. Why was he telling her to call him that? His demeanor shifted instantly. He chuckled awkwardly, brushing it off and saying it was just an inside joke between the two of them. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I asked him again, this time more firmly, what exactly the joke was. That's when he said that since my husband is bedridden and unable to participate in daily life as he used to, he felt it was right that my daughter have a real father figure around and that he could potentially become sort of her dad if my husband ever passed away. His words landed like a punch. The audacity, the entitlement, the sheer inappropriateness of it all was overwhelming. This wasn't just a boundary being crossed. This was a blatant, calculated attempt to insert himself into roles he has absolutely no right to claim. He was not only disregarding the presence of my husband, who, despite his illness, is still very much her father, but also disrespecting me as a mother, as a wife, and as a human being trying to hold her family together during a time of crisis. From that moment, any lingering doubt I had about his intentions vanished. His behavior is not only unsettling, it's manipulative and dangerous, especially when it involves my child. What are you even talking about? I demanded, my voice rising in anger and shock. Potential dad to my daughter? The words tasted vile, just repeating them. I couldn't hold it in. I yelled at him, furious and heartbroken all at once. I reminded him that my husband is still very much alive. Yes, he's ill. Yes, he's bedridden, but he is still here. He is still her father, and God forbid something ever happened to him. He would still be the only father my daughter would ever have. That bond cannot be replaced or rewritten by anyone, not by circumstance and certainly not by him. But instead of backing down, my stepfather-in-law tried to defend himself. He started clamoring for words, insisting that my daughter didn't have to live without a father figure, and that he could easily solve that problem by stepping in and being like a father to her. As if this was some simple gap to be filled, like a role in a play he could audition for. The arrogance of it was staggering. I didn't hold back. I raised my voice and told him firmly that he was my daughter's grandfather and nothing more. He needed to know his place and respect the boundaries of that role. What he was saying was completely inappropriate, disrespectful, and frankly, disturbing. I made it clear that this kind of talk was unacceptable and I would not tolerate it under any circumstances. My stepfather-in-law looked visibly angry, like he had expected me to just accept his nonsense quietly, to roll over and let him say whatever he wanted without consequence. But I refused to let that happen. We exchanged a few more heated words, sharp, direct, and no longer polite. I was furious, every word fueled by the anger of someone fiercely protecting her family. Finally, I told him to leave. He did, but the tension lingered like a dark cloud hanging over us. Since that day, I've been living with a constant knot of fear and anxiety whenever I think about leaving my daughter in the care of my mother-in-law and her husband. What should be a safe and comforting environment has become a source of worry and unease. My trust in them has been shattered, and I don't know how to rebuild it. My mother-in-law has been calling me frequently, trying to reach out, but I honestly don't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that you're scared to leave your child with them, especially when they don't seem to acknowledge the gravity of the situation? I'm stuck between wanting to protect my daughter and feeling isolated in this painful dilemma. AITA if I tell her about all the inappropriate things her husband has said to me. I just don't want to cause any unnecessary drama in the family. Update 1. Since sharing my story, a few questions have come up repeatedly, and I thought it might help to address them here, both to clarify things and to set the record straight. Question: why don't you just talk to your mother-in-law and clear the air? I've tried. I did bring up the inappropriate behavior of my stepfather-in-law with her privately, hoping she would understand and support me, but she dismissed my concerns, saying it was a misunderstanding and that his intentions were good. That response hurt deeply because it made me feel invalidated and unsafe. I don't think clearing the air is possible when the problem isn't fully acknowledged. Question: why don't you just keep your daughter away from your stepfather-in-law? I absolutely have to from now on. But the challenge is that my daughter spends time at my mother-in-law's house and my stepfather-in-law is there. It's difficult to avoid him completely without isolating my daughter or straining family relationships further. I'm actively trying to protect her and myself, but it's a delicate balance. Question: why don't you ask your husband to handle this? My husband already has enough on his plate. I'm doing my best to protect our family while he focuses on his health and recovery. It's not easy, but I feel it's my responsibility right now. Update 2. It truly sends a chill down my spine whenever I reflect on everything that's happened and consider the possibility that if my stepfather-in-law's behavior has made me feel so uneasy and disturbed, then there is a very real chance that he might have caused similar discomfort to my daughter. All this time, I never allowed myself to think about this possibility. My focus has been so intensely fixed on trying to protect my husband, managing the overwhelming responsibilities of our situation, and coping with my own emotions that I simply didn't stop to consider how my daughter might have experienced stepfather-in-law's presence and actions. Looking back now, it's a terrifying thought to realize that my child, who is innocent and trusting, may have been exposed to his gross behavior too. That might have made her feel confused, unsafe, or uneasy. I mean, if stepfather-in-law can behave with me this way, there's a very real chance that he might have tried to behave the same with my daughter. The idea that someone I should be able to trust, someone who should be nurturing and protective, could have crossed boundaries with my child in any way is deeply unsettling and fills me with anger. It's very painful to admit, but I know I have to be even more careful and watchful to keep her safe. Not just physically, but also emotionally. Kids often don't have the words or understanding to explain what they're going through, so it's up to the adults to notice and protect them. I want to sincerely thank the people in the comments for bringing this to my attention. Sometimes when you're in the middle of a situation, it's easy to overlook certain details or minimize their impact. So I am glad that people have pointed this out in the comments and given me something to think about. Update 3. So this week I finally found the courage to have a serious conversation with my mother-in-law about everything that's been happening. I knew this talk would stir up a lot of emotions and tension, but I felt I couldn't keep delaying this conversation and carrying this burden alone anymore. For anyone who might have worried that my mother-in-law wouldn't believe me or wouldn't take my side, I want to be clear. She stood firmly with me. I was shaking and crying as I poured my heart out to her, repeatedly apologizing as if somehow I was to blame. Despite the awkwardness of the conversation, she completely validated my feelings and my experiences. She held me close, wrapping me in a hug, and told me over and over that I had absolutely nothing to apologize for. That reassurance was very surprising but healing. She apologized to me for not taking me seriously last time and admitted that she had no idea her husband's behavior was this bad. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, finally, I wouldn't have to face this nightmare on my own, and that she would take our side and stand up for us. After I finished telling my mother-in-law everything, she didn't waste a moment. She immediately called out the stepfather-in-law, who was in the other room, and confronted him head-on about what I had shared. At first, he reacted exactly as I expected. He denied everything and tried to downplay the situation, speaking in a low, dismissive tone, as if brushing off serious accusations would make them go away. But my mother-in-law was relentless. She raised her voice and kept yelling at him, refusing to let him off the hook. Gradually, his defenses began to crumble and he started to slip. When my mother-in-law demanded to know why he would ever think it was acceptable to consider himself the potential dad to my daughter, his response shocked us both. He doubled down, arrogantly claiming that since he was the man of the house, it was his role and responsibility to look out for us, and he didn't think my daughter calling him daddy was bad. His words were not only insulting, they were completely unacceptable and showed a disturbing sense of entitlement. My mother-in-law exploded in anger, shouting at him about how ridiculous and inappropriate his behavior was. I stood there shaking my head in disbelief and disgust, struggling to process how anyone could justify such an outrageous claim. I told him clearly that he was not the man in my house, and nor would he ever be. I made it unmistakably clear that while I was grateful for his help for my husband, I was a grown woman who could take care of myself and my daughter, so we didn't need him to play any sort of father figure in my daughter's life. Stepfather-in-law looked pissed when he heard this. Later, when I left their place with my daughter, I could still hear my mother-in-law and stepfather-in-law arguing loudly behind me. Their voices echoed through the house, a fierce battle of wills that gave me a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Before I left, my mother-in-law pulled me aside and assured me over and over again that she was going to make absolutely certain that he would never speak to me or my daughter that way again. Her words brought a flicker of comfort in an otherwise painful situation, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. That evening, I also went to visit my husband at the hospital and told him everything. The inappropriate comments, the uncomfortable encounters, the confrontation between my mother-in-law and stepfather-in-law. Hearing the full story shook him deeply. He was stunned and visibly upset that his own stepfather could say such hurtful and disturbing things to me, especially during such a vulnerable time in our lives. We spent hours talking through the emotions, the fears, and what this all meant for our family moving forward. It was one of the hardest conversations we've had since his illness began. I am kind of glad that I have exposed my stepfather-in-law and established my boundary with him. Update 4. After everything that has happened, I have made a firm and clear decision. I will no longer leave my daughter in the care of my mother-in-law. The relationship between her and her husband, the stepfather-in-law, is still deeply strained and unresolved right now, and I cannot risk my daughter being around someone who has shown such inappropriate and disrespectful behavior towards both me and her. My priority is to protect her safety and emotional well-being, no matter how difficult it may be. However, my stepfather-in-law is now retaliating in the worst possible way. He has openly threatened to withdraw all financial support for my husband's medical bills and ongoing care. He has made it explicitly known to my husband that he will no longer contribute any money toward my husband's treatment or the expenses that come with it. and he blames me for creating tensions in the family. Stepfather-in-law's sudden threat has created a wedge between my husband and me, which hurts more than I can put into words. My husband, understandably overwhelmed by the financial strain and desperate for help, now believes that I should apologize to his stepfather and try to make things right with him. He thinks that the money is too important to risk losing and that I should put aside my feelings and the seriousness of what happened for the sake of the family welfare. But I have refused. I have made it absolutely clear to my husband I will not apologize or compromise on this. The respect, safety, and dignity of myself and my daughter come before any financial support that comes with strings attached. This is the hill I'm willing to die on. No amount of money is worth sacrificing our well-being or allowing someone who has acted so grossly to control our lives and define our boundaries. My husband is so angry that he's refusing to talk to me now. Somehow, I have become the villain in all of this, when I didn't even do anything. I'm not sure what the future holds for us, but one thing I do know is that I will never allow my creepy stepfather-in-law anywhere near me or my daughter again. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.